Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fertility TV. I am Dr. Marc Sklar, the fertility expert, and today I have the environmental toxin expert with me, which I'm really excited to bring to all of you. I've got Lara Adler here, and if you have not met her before, you're in for a treat today, because when it comes to figuring out environmental health and discovering what might be affecting your health through your environment and the world we live in, then Lara is the woman to go to, which is why I'm bringing her to all of you, because this topic is really important for not just overall health and everything that we do, unfortunately, in life, but for sure for preconception and fertility. So thanks for joining.
I'm going
Thank you for having me. Obviously, I think you're fantastic, and this is going to be really fun. And even though this is a sometimes overwhelming topic, I think that, we can have fun talking about it and kind of take some of the sting out.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely overwhelming. I mean, sometimes
Yes.
for me, it's overwhelming. My wife and I are moving into a new house, and it's like, okay, what can we do? What can't we do? Where do I need to have this and that? So, it's overwhelming for her, and she's like, this is your job, you do it.
Yes. Well, that you should just call me. But yeah, I mean, it is an overwhelming topic. And I think especially for women that are either in the preconception space or women that are pregnant, it's like doubly overwhelming because is already so much stuff that they're trying to learn about and do correctly. And they're like walking on eggshells, afraid of everything, because there's just been so much sort of like threatening vibe about like, you can't do this and you can't do that. And so like, they're just like, oh, I don't want to, I don't want to mess up my baby, or whatever it is. And then, we start coming in and talking about all the chemicals that we're being exposed to, and then figuring out what do we do about that adds like this whole other layer. So I really just try to kind of simplify it as much as possible, and really keep it action oriented, because, the upside to this whole conversation is that there is actually a lot that we can do to reduce our exposures. And the earlier that we can start that process, the better for our health and for future generations, whenever they may arrive.
Yeah, no, it's really, really important. It's funny you were saying that, and I was laughing because I just hear my wife's voice in my head saying, now we can't eat this and we can't eat that. We can't touch this. We can't do that. I'm going to live in a bubble and I'm not going to eat.
Well, so I have my joke about that is because it's everybody says that. They're like, I just want to live in a plastic bubble. But then like the joke is like, well, what kind of plastic is it? And is it off-gassing? Which is like a joke that very few people laugh at. So thank you. But that's my humor. And There's not that many opportunities to make jokes in the toxins conversation. So I'll take them where I can get them. But yeah, it's, I feel like, unfortunately, there's a lot of, when it comes to environmental toxins, there's a lot of, I guess, scaremongering or fear mongering, or like, oh my God, this is going to give you cancer, or like, this is going to cause X, Y, and Z. And it's very sort of doomsday scenario. And I think that really turns a lot of people off to being even open to listening about what the issues are and then what the action steps are. And I think that's a really big problem, because it's causing this sort of barrier for people to start taking action. And the bottom line is, when it comes to environmental chemicals, and the research really sort of demonstrates this, is that exposure to toxic chemicals is the primary driver of disease. Joseph Pizzorno, who's the founder of Bastyr University and a leader in the environmental health, environmental medicine space, has basically come to that conclusion that environmental chemicals are the primary driver of all chronic disease, all of it. Because toxins affect our mitochondria, which are the sort of power cells that like make our body function. And if those get messed up, then there's this long, complicated chain of ways that it can really impact our health in negative ways. And so it seems like it's this sort of woo-woo out there, like, oh, toxins, that it might not be like a real thing, right? Like it might be a thing that you'd see on BuzzFeed or on the Goop website, right? Like toxins, they're so bad. But the reality is they are bad, and we are all exposed to them. And the Centers for Disease Control is regularly monitoring the levels of chemicals in people, and the results aren't that great.
No.
Right? Some chemicals that we're exposed, 93, 98% of people have them in metabolites of these chemicals in our bodies. Yeah.
You use this word interchangeably, and I want to see if this makes people kind of relate to a little bit differently.
Yes.
You use toxins and chemicals interchangeably.
Yes. And I always actually in my classes, I sort of caveat that, and I explain. So first of all, the focus of my work is really looking at chemical toxicants. So there's toxin and there's toxicants. So poison ivy is a toxin. Snake venom is a toxin. So technically, if we're talking technical here, toxin relates specifically to like animal-related, plant or animal-related things that can poison us. A toxicant is a man-made chemical.
Okay.
And not all chemicals are toxicants.
Okay. But
all toxicants are chemical, right? So it's like the square is not always a rectangle, but a rectangle's something like that. One of those. I'm clearly not, geometry is not my jam. Yeah, so there is a distinction, and I use those terms interchangeably because what I'm teaching about and what I'm talking about are the chemicals that are toxic. Right? There's thousands of chemicals out there that are not toxic, or there's no research to indicate that they're toxic. So we never want to say all chemicals are bad, because that's not true, because I'm chemical. I'm made of chemicals. You're made of chemicals. Water is a chemical. Everything is chemical.
Yeah. So I think, and for all of you listening, I think that's an important factor, because if you are turned off by the word toxins,
yes,
right? Or, toxic exposure, if you just think of environmental chemicals, chemical exposure, if you're not turned off by the word toxin, I think we could all be turned off by the word of, chemical exposure.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Using that word interchangeably is I think is important. And I think it's important for everyone listening to be able to connect to that and understand
yes.
that process, so that you're not turned off. Because like you said, if we don't, sometimes it's so overwhelming that we would rather be ignorant about it and just keep going on with our business of what we're doing.
Right.
We're trying to make it so, one, you're not ignorant about it, you are aware of it, but it's also kind of simple baby steps of things that you can do.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I think is helpful to sort of contextualize all of this is that, when I'm saying toxin or toxicant even, and I use those terms interchangeably, because even though toxicant is the technically correct term, it's generally referred to as a toxin is an easier way to just say it. Yeah. But, most people, when they hear that term, will think, oh, if I take this, it's going to cause like an immediate reaction. I'm going to have to go to the emergency room. I'm going to have to call poison control, that it's toxic in that way, like it's acutely toxic. And when it comes to what we're being exposed to in our environment, like in the air that we breathe and the water that we drink and the foods that we buy, the personal care products and cleaning products that we use, unless you're drinking a bottle of bleach, which hopefully no one's doing that, they don't affect us in that sort of acute manner. It's very unusual for that to happen. I mean, some people might, for example, have an asthma attack or something like that. Like that would be an acute acute symptom of an exposure to environmental chemicals. But we're not talking about like occupational exposures of people working in a factory. We're just talking about normal people going to a grocery store, buying stuff to clean their kitchen with, buying shampoos and body lotions, and every day toxifying their body using those products. And it's not an overt symptom or reaction. It's this subtle, really slow build up. And in the frustrating part, which makes it hard for people to connect the dots, is that sometimes it can take 10, 20, 30 years for a health condition to manifest, and because of the result of toxic exposures. And so what I always tell people, and I think this is also a good segue into like the kind of meat of what we should be looking at, is that there's no one single exposure that you're going to get today or tomorrow from washing your hair one more time that's going to suddenly tip the scales. It doesn't really work in that manner. It's this cumulative, chronic, long-term use of these products. And so I like to tell that to people so that it tempers some of the freak out. And they don't feel like they need to run around their house with their hair on fire, throwing everything out. What I tell people, use what you have. If you feel like tossing stuff out and doing a big old replacement shopping trip, great. But otherwise, just use what you have, let it run out. And then when you need to go buy something new, buy something better.
Right.
It's just an easier way to do it. So it's not like, oh, this, like I said, this one more time of shampooing my hair with, fill in the blank Pantene or whatever. I always use Prel as an example, but I don't even know if they make that anymore, and it's very dated. So I don't know why I always use that.
I use an example recently and often about cars, and I always go back to the cheap car, and I always say Yugo, but no one knows what a Yugo is unless they were
of a certain age. Yeah.
I feel the same.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know why I do that. So also, and this has absolutely nothing to do with what we were talking about, but I have to say it now that I thought it and said it out loud. Anytime I'm testing an email login or an opt-in, I always use the name Betty Sue. What's up with that? I'm like very dated. I don't know. Every single time without fail. It's the only thing that comes to my mind. I don't even know anybody by that name.
Probably better than, Jane Smith or something.
Yeah, I don't know why. Betty Sue every time. Anyway. Yeah, but the idea is that it's not that one single thing, that one piece of fish that's going to really do us in. And so it allows for a little bit of grace in sort of transitioning.
Yeah, which is huge, because if not, we're all going around like everything's going to end, the world's going to end tomorrow.
Well, and it's what I find really interesting. So I actually have a term that I use to describe people who, when they start learning about toxins, they become hyper fixated and almost neurotic about it. And I call it detoxorexia. Hyper obsessed with detoxing. And these are the people that are like, should I wear gloves when I go to the grocery store or ride the subway? It's like, no. So, and I, in those instances, I like to remind people that stress is toxic.
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
We don't.
For the Betty Sues out there listening.
Yes.
We're going to cover the 10 ways to reduce the toxins in your home.
Yes.
So, where should we start? What's number one?
I honestly think that the number one, and I really consider this a non-negotiable, is eat organic as much as possible. This is not like some elitist buzzwordy thing like, oh, it's organic. It actually is really important. And I think everybody should be eating this way, but absolutely, especially women that are in preconception, that are pregnant, that are breastfeeding, that have small children. This is the most vulnerable window of human life, especially in utero. That's where actually, our building blocks are, this is the building block of human life. And a lot of the chemicals that we're exposed to, including pesticides that are residues of which are found on our conventional foods, really disrupt this building process in a lot of different ways. And so there's a lot of really interesting research, or there's a fair amount of interesting research of what happens when people switch from eating a conventional diet that's got residues of these organophosphate pesticides, which are endocrine disruptors. So they trash our hormones. They're carcinogens, they're neurotoxins. They really mess us up in a lot of ways. They can interfere with fertility in both men and women. So they're well documented to be pretty harmful. But there's some really great research that says that when people switch from a mostly conventional diet to a mostly organic diet, not even 100%, because that's pretty impossible. It's really hard to do that. And it's also pretty expensive. You can drop circulating pesticide levels in the urine by 90% in 3 to 5 days. In 3 to 5 days.
Yeah, that quick.
that fast. And that's because our bodies, some of these, not all chemicals, but some chemicals that are water soluble, we're able to process them out and sort of pee them out pretty quickly. And, some of these chemicals, they can exit our body within 24 hours, right? We eat them, our body processes them, and then there they go, bye-bye. Except that we're constantly adding new ones in, so the bucket never empties, and that's the problem. So
and then in basically 3 to 5, you said 3 to 5 days.
3 to 5 days.
Yeah, 3 to 5 days, you can empty the bucket, so to speak.
Yes, or at least empty the bucket of what's, in urine. Some chemicals are going to end up in other places, like in our bone and our fatty tissues or our organs, in which case they're harder to get rid of. But I think that statistic is really helpful for people to hear, because it shows that you can actually have a measurable and demonstrable reduction in exposure just through this one intervention. And so number one, hands down, is organic as much as possible, including organic dairy, grass-fed meats, wild-caught, low on food chain seafood. All of those things are going to be really important. So that's number one.
I'm so glad you said that as number one, because I feel like I say this all day long to people.
Yeah.
They're like, so what else can I do? Like, well, have you done the diet part of what we've talked about?
Yeah.
So, and I feel like it's like a broken record. So it's nice for them to hear it from you.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of those studies myself, and that's why I'm such a big proponent of eating clean and eating healthy, eating organic. I mean, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
And for people that maybe, have to learn to, or have to budget, right? Most of us don't have the luxury of buying 100% organic. I always point people towards the environmental working groups, Dirty Dozen Clean 15 list that rates the fruits and vegetables that have the highest residues, and that's the Dirty Dozen, and then the ones that are the Clean 15, and those are the lowest residues. So if you have to sort of triage your dollars, buy organic of the Dirty Dozen, and you can afford, if you need to, buy conventional of the other. But what's interesting, and a lot of people don't know this, is that data comes from the USDA's pesticide monitoring program, and the data is done, or is pulled after the researchers have actually washed the produce. So they're trying to mimic what the consumer is doing at home, which is, I'm going to wash my red pepper, I'm going to wash my apple, and then they test for the pesticide residues.
Okay.
So I think that's an important piece to know. Like, washing is not enough. Washing or peeling even can help a little, but we also have to understand that a lot of pesticides are not on the outside of the fruit or vegetable, they're actually in it.
Inside, yeah.
So there's no amount of like cutting away that's going to cut away the part that's got pesticides on it. So organic as much as possible is definitely number one.
Cool.
Number two, I would say is, and the next maybe 2 or 3 item lists on the item, like, doesn't matter the sequence, like organic is number one all the time, but like do them in any order, is to eliminate unnecessary fragrance in the home. And unnecessary is a little bit of a unnecessary word, because technically none of them are necessary, but at the very least, get rid of the plugins, the Febrezes, scented candles, all those kinds of synthetic fragranced products. All of those products contain chemicals inside the mixture of the fragrance. So in the fragrance, there's up to 3,000 different chemicals that can be used to actually manufacture the scent. And then there's other chemicals added to that mixture to stabilize it and to fix it. So it's what helps it stick on your clothes after you do your laundry. It helps it, stay in your hair so that people can smell it, 10 hours after you washed it. And those chemicals are phthalates, and phthalates are endocrine disruptors.
Yeah. Can I add to that?
Yes.
Because I notice it, I'm sensitive to it. All those things that people think smell good, to me just smell.
Oh, they smell terrible. Terrible.
But I got in an Uber car.
Oh my God, I just had this on Sunday.
And, he had like 10.
Oh my
I
God.
don't know what the
Yes.
scent was, but it was like 10 of the little trees hanging from his mirror. And all I wanted to do was just open up every window because I
Yeah.
was dying.
Yes.
So those little things are terrible. And when you go
Yes.
get your car cleaned and they want to put a scent in your car,
No. No.
those sorts of things as well, not just in the house, but in your car.
Absolutely. I just had this experience and I actually asked he had the ones that plug into the air vent. And I just asked him, I said, I'm sorry, can you take those out at least you can put them back in when I get out and I need to crack the windows. And then we ended up having this whole conversation about endocrine disrupting chemicals.
You know who you're talking to.
Yes. Well, I had just come from this environmental health symposium conference on my way to the airport. So I was like, oh, the irony. But so that, we're already, so we're already exposed to chemicals in our car, right?
Oh yeah.
Our cars are already off-gassing stuff. And the reality is we can't do anything about that. That's just the way cars are manufactured. And unless we're all willing to...
Car scent.
Yeah, new car scent is like a mixture of hundreds of chemicals, including phthalates.
Yeah, think toxins.
Yes, just not good. And I don't prescribe horse and buggy as a replacement for a car, right? So at the very least, let's not make it worse by using plug-in air fresheners or things like that. If you want to diffuse a little good quality essential oil in your car, okay. But I think it's unnecessary. And what's nice is that once you get rid of all of this stuff, in the same way that when you stop eating like highly salty, super hyper palatable food, your palate changes and becomes more subtle. You can taste the subtleties of food. The same thing is with your sense of smell. So when you stop, deadening your sense of smell with these really highly synthetic chemicals, you just have it just like recalibrates your sense of smell, which is great. Unless you get into a cab that has air fresheners and then you're like, wow. So just toss those things. They're not actually serving a purpose. If you want your house to smell nice, bring in some, again, good quality essential oils, bring in some flowers if you don't have allergies. They're just unnecessary. And, we're breathing these things in all day, every day. And if you're breathing it, it's getting into your body. The fastest way for anything to enter your bloodstream outside of injection is through inhalation. It goes right into the bloodstream. So just ditch those. That would be number 2, unnecessary. Now, there are fragrances hiding in other products. So I sort of like to chunk them down so that people aren't like, oh my God, I have to dump everything. So chunk it down. Start buying organic. Just toss all that garbage plugins and air fresheners. And I would actually add incense to that list. Incense also releases particulate matter into the air, which is similarly harmful to cigarette smoke.
Okay.
So I'm just not, all these yoga studios.
Days where I used to burn Nag Champa all day.
Yes. So, occasionally I will use, for example, something like Palo Santo, which is a wood, and I'll burn that. But I also do it with the windows open.
Yeah. Or like a little bit of just like sage.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. But again, like we're not letting these things burn for half an hour like we would with incense and then, keeping the scent close into our house. So encourage that. Number 3, I would say, is let's start shifting away from using plastics in our kitchen.
Yeah.
Plastics are another source of endocrine disruptors.
Remember, like the key words for everyone watching, we keep bringing up at every one of these stages, right? We bring up the words endocrine disruptors.
Yeah.
Endocrine disruptors, if I could get the word out properly, is all about affecting your hormones and hormone balance and regulation. So when we're talking about fertility and preconception and pregnancy, this is a big deal. So.
It's a huge deal. And there's so much research talking about this connection between endocrine disrupting chemicals and fertility and birth outcomes. And I just think that, again, the earlier that we can sort of get on this gravy train, the better. So that, we have to also think about how, and I'm sure that you teach into this, it's our cells are germ cells, sperm, eggs, you know, they're feeding off of what we give them, right?
Yep.
Essentially. And if we're giving them garbage, they're going to have a harder time creating this like work of art human being if you've given them a bunch of like crappy acrylic paints, or I don't know, it's a weird analogy, but like we have to give them good materials and we have to get rid of the things that are going to mess up that process.
Yeah,
so
I just had that conversation with a patient, I think it was yesterday, a young couple, and they were asking me like, you know, just fresh pregnant, and you know, what should I not eat? And you know, I was like, well, this is, you know, this can be a long conversation.
Yeah.
And it depends to the degree that you want to go. But think right now, although you don't think this way, but you are already a mom at this moment of time.
Yes.
You're just caring for your child in a different way.
Yeah.
So I know nothing about your diet in any way, but I'm going to exaggerate for a moment. If you ate McDonald's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, that's going to impact the child that you're raising inside of you right now.
Yes.
You know, later, and you're impacting their health forever.
Forever.
So, you know, and I went on, which we've kind of already done here. So it's that same sort of thought process that we have to understand that we're impacting ourselves and our future children's cells.
Yes.
And generations beyond. So we have to look at that and think with those eyes, if you will.
Yes.
When you're making choices.
Well, especially, and we, you know, maybe it's a bit of a maybe we can come back and talk about toxins and epigenetics, because it's also a big, whole other ball of wax. But, you know, we have to think that like when mom is pregnant, she's exposed to something, which we're all exposed to stuff, but like she's exposed to something and happens to be an exposure during the specific, you know, 2-week window of development or 5-day window of fetal development, whatever it is. Mom is being exposed, her fetus is being exposed, and the egg cells of that fetus, which are in development, are also being exposed. So it's 3 generations being exposed at once. And this is where we have a potential longer term impact. And we can't just think about ourselves. It really is about our children and our grandchildren.
Yeah. Well, and similarly, you know, we'll get back to plastics in a second, but similarly, when you hear this old traditional Native American sayings of like 7 generations, right? They're looking 7 generations. What will our actions have 7 generations from now? I think similarly, we need to have that, because that's not difficult to think about. If you just said, okay, that's 3 generations right there, you're just talking, you know, 2 other generations. You've got 7 that you've got essentially. So if we look at our bodies and our families in that same way as we do, you know, the earth, which we don't do that well already.
No.
Then, you know, I think we'll take different actions. And plastics as number 3 is definitely one of those big ones. I mean, if we could ban plastics everywhere right now, that would be a huge justice for us as a world environment.
Right. And that's not actually ever going to happen.
No, it's never going to happen.
No, it's never going to happen. And, you know, what I tell people, at least when it comes to the immediate exposures that like we're concerned about in this conversation, right? We're not talking about the planet, even though like sometimes we have to think in sort of the immediacy. And through that lens, I say, you know, look, yes, all plastics are bad, but like we're never going to rid our lives from plastic entirely, right? It's just literally not possible. I, you know, look around my home, I look around my office even, there's plastic everywhere. It's impossible to avoid at this day and age, but we can reduce our exposure to plastics where it's in contact with food, and that's where it matters the most.
That's huge.
That's
that Tupperware and putting it in the microwave, which is just,
yeah, that's like a hard no across the board. Yeah. And so the reason for that, again, the chemicals that we just keep bringing them up, they're endocrine disruptors. And there's not just one, there's, you know, multitude of chemicals that seem to be endocrine disruptors that are in all types of plastics. So there's not safe plastics. There are safer plastics.
Sure.
But there's not safe plastics.
Yeah.
So even like the bio-based, corn-based plastics seem to have compounds that seem to exhibit this estrogenic activity. So there's no like, oh, I'm going to go and use a safer plastic. In all the opportunities that we have to do so, just kind of toss it aside. So, you know, I have a glass drinking straw that I was just drinking out of. They're wonderful. If you've never used one, they're like the greatest. They just feel really nice in your mouth.
I think kids would destroy them.
You would actually be surprised. So most of these are made of borosilicate glass, which is really strong. Yes. Okay. So I had one, not this one, but another one. I've had it maybe for 7 or 8 years. I've dropped it. I cannot tell you how many times. Totally fine.
Cool.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, I actually prefer them to the stainless steel ones, especially with kids, because I feel like the stainless steel ones, you just jam into the roof of your mouth and that just gives me that face. Yeah. So I like the glass ones. Cool. But, so yeah, no plastic Tupperware containers, no reusing things like yogurt containers. I know a lot of us are looking at it from this, like, well, I don't want to be wasteful. I don't want to just throw it out. So we're kind of solving one problem and creating another in its place. Yeah. So, you know, you can look, I mean, this is a mason jar. You can buy a case of these. It's a quart mason jar. You can buy a case of them for like $12 on Amazon. Yeah. They're great ways to store your leftovers. It's really easy. Target, Walmart, Costco, all these places have glass storage containers. Yeah. So, you know, just think about how much more wonderful it's going to be to go into your kitchen cabinets or your drawer and not open it and be like, I've got 500 lids and 6 containers, and I don't know where all the containers went, but I've got all these extra lids. Like, just get rid of all that garbage plastic stuff.
Well, someone had given us, can't remember who it was, but like all these plastic storage containers for whatever.
Yeah.
Pasta, whatever, you know, those.
Yeah.
And aside, we didn't want to be rude. We have them. We've been using them. And just everything I take out of it.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's not. So, you know, in instances like that, I'd be like, great, I'm going to go move them to the garage and I'm going to put all the like loose screws or like kids' crayons, like find other uses for them. Yeah. But the primary issue is that the chemicals that are used to manufacture plastics are not tightly bound from a molecular standpoint. So they kind of fall off all the time. And when we put hot food, oily food, acidic food, any of those things in contact with plastic, which is most of the food that we eat, one or the other, or all three if you've got like tomato sauce, everybody's had that orange stained Tupperware container, right? That like you can't get clean. And it's because the physical line between where the plastic ends and the sauce begins gets blurred. So you actually have molecules of oil physically embedded into the structure of the plastic, which is why it doesn't get clean. People love that analogy because they're like, everybody has one of those. And so the inverse of that is we're actually getting plastic molecules in our sauce. Right. So ditch the plastic. That's easily number 3.
4.
Number 4, I would say let's start shifting towards safer personal care products. Our skin is our largest organ. We do not absorb 100% of what we put on it, but we absorb a lot. And, you know, I think it's really overlooked area for health and wellness. Like it's really hard for people to make a connection between like their Jergens body lotion and the fact that they might be having a hard time getting pregnant. Right? These feel like apples and potatoes. They're just not even in the same sphere, but they're actually very connected. And so, again, looking for personal care products that are free of fragrance. You do actually have to read the ingredients because even fragrance-free products often have fragrance added to mask an unpleasant chemical smell. Which is like a real screwy thing to do, but it happens. So, you know, look for the word fragrance or perfume. Look, you're never going to see the word phthalate because they don't have to, there's no disclosure laws about that. So they don't have to tell you.
That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. Don't get me started on that side of the conversation. Things like parabens, which is a preservative. These are also endocrine disrupting chemicals. You know, it's really, looking at all the types of chemicals that we're exposed to, I still am sort of shocked, if you will, that so many of these chemicals are endocrine disruptors. So many of them.
But it makes, you know, for me, it's not that surprising just because logically in my head, it makes sense. This is such a huge and very important system
Yeah.
in the body. And it's so volatile, right? It's so sensitive.
Yes.
And it's that sensitivity that really makes it affected by all of these things.
Right, which is true. I just reread Florence Williams' books, Breasts, which if people haven't read it, it's a wonderful book. She's a wonderful writer. It's all about breasts. And, you know, everything from implants and that whole craze to the chemicals that build up inside them. And that, you know, the breast is the only organ on the body that develops after adulthood. Like, it's literally the only one that's like, I'm still growing, I'm still doing stuff. Well, the rest of you is finished, so to speak. And that because it's going through those stages, it is literally, they're literally our antenna to sense the environment. Oh, your baby has a cold, let me produce a different type of milk. Like, they're brilliant, they're amazing. We barely know anything about them.
That's a fantastic analogy.
Yeah, they're like antenna that are sort of sensing the world, and that's very likely why the breasts in particular are so hypersensitive to chemical exposures.
Very
so chemical exposure. That's their job, is to be hypersensitive and to be alert and to, you know, anyway, it's a fascinating book. And she talked about that. So everybody should go read that book. If you have breasts or know anyone that has breasts, which is all of us, including men, read the book.
Yeah.
So finding safer personal care products that don't have these chemicals. I'm not going to go through the laundry list of what they are, but there's great resources online. I've got some pages that I'm putting together of like a really curated selection of non-toxic products. It's wonderful to see this area of the marketplace expanding. It's the fastest growing sector in the personal care product industry is natural, chemical-free, organic, and I did this because organic is not a regulated term, but you can still find good organic products. And again, the Environmental Working Group has a great database that helps you find safer products.
They don't have everything in there, but you can search for many things and they'll give a rating. And
yeah, and what's wonderful is some of these products are now at like big, like Target. Target sells some stuff that's like, you know, they sell makeup from a company called Well People, which is an EWG verified to have, you know, none of these really toxic chemicals in them, which are great. So yeah, we're all moving in the right direction here. So what number was that? 4?
Yeah, we're on 5, I think.
Okay, 5. I could probably do this for 5 hours. The next one would be safer cleaning products. Yeah. There was just a study that came out, or a study that came out and then it was in the news that cleaning products were, women who use cleaning products, I don't remember how many days a week or whatever it was, had a greater risk of, I don't remember if it was cancer or what, than people who smoke, like smokers.
Really?
Yes, that people who. I
didn't see that.
Yeah, it was really recent. I didn't read the study. I just kind of read the headline. Yeah. But the study the headline doesn't surprise me because I've been reading about that for ages. But yeah, but it's like worse than smoking.
Yeah, we're using, I think it's twofold, right? Because you're using all these chemicals and you're inhaling the toxins while you're cleaning. And
yes,
sometimes, let's just say in your bathroom, in a very enclosed space, right? And then on top of it, if you're not using any gloves.
Yes, you're absorbing it.
With your skin.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, so it's a big deal. And again, you know, I think that there's a lot of marketing at play here. We're just like, oh, it kills 99.99% of germs. Unless there's like MRSA in the house.
It doesn't need to do that.
You don't need that. You don't need that. And people overkill. No, with the antibacterials.
Yeah, like germs are not bad.
Germs are good.
All of them are not bad.
In fact, our bodies are more germ than they are us. So like, let's give germs a break. Right? Like they're more microorganisms than they are human cells.
Yep.
So let's stop giving them a bad rap. So yeah, just switching out to safer cleaning products or even DIY. If people are on a budget, this is like the best way to go cheap.
Yeah, do it yourself.
Go to Costco and buy it. I think they sell these 10 or 15 pound bags of baking soda.
Yeah, big.
Giant bags. A little vinegar, a little lemon juice, and you're good to go. Like,
you're good.
Yeah, in water, you're good to go. And there's tons of resources online if people really want to get into the DIY space with cleaning products. Mommy Potamus is a blogger. She's got great
she does
guide on DIY non-toxic cleaning products that I love. So I point people to that all the time because I don't want to come up with all these recipes. She did it. There's like 80 recipes in this thing. Anyway, so that would be 5. I would say take off your shoes when you come inside. This seems like such a frumpy suggestion, but people totally underestimate how much crap they actually track in on the soles of their shoes.
Yep.
It's pesticides, it's particulate matter from car exhaust, it's heavy metals, it's fecal matter from the dog poop that you stepped in last week, whatever it is, it's all getting tracked into your house.
Yeah.
And not only are we all just generally being exposed to these things, but babies and animals who are crawling around on the floor are disproportionately exposed.
Yeah.
So it's super important. Just take your shoes off at the door, wear house slippers, wear socks, and have a no shoes in the house policy. Some cultures around the world, this is just how they live.
Just thinking that exact same thing.
Yeah.
Just think of Japan.
Yes, that's just, and like, I'll tell you this, it saves your carpets and it saves you from all the extra mopping that you'd have to do.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a huge deal. So take your shoes off. Let's see. I'd probably put this a little top of the list. It's a little bit higher of an investment. So it's less of an avoidance behavior and more of an intervention. And that's filter your water. Huge one. Yep. Filter your water. That's probably going to go up there with in the 2 or 3, number 2 or number 3.
Right after, Eat Organic was number 1. I can't remember what was number 2. Number 2 was the
fragrances.
The fragrances. Our list, we're just going of our pants, but this would go right up there.
Yeah, it would really go right up there. People don't really understand. And it's not super, super easy to understand. I mean, the bottom line is any filter is better than no filter, period, end of story. But there are so many chemicals in our drinking water, many that are unregulated, including pharmaceuticals, including, estrogen coming from birth control pills that we pee out that get flushed into the water system that don't get filtered out. We've got narcotics. There's even research studies that can extrapolate out using the data of methamphetamines in the water to see how many methamphetamine users there are in their community. Like, it's pretty fascinating statistical analysis of number crunching, but that's
fringe.
Yeah, it's not good. And then we've got chemicals that are regulated. So there's hundreds of chemicals that are in the drinking water, probably thousands. There's only 89 that are technically regulated by the EPA in the United States. And a lot of those chemicals, even at levels that the EPA deems safe or the maximum contaminant level, these are not health-based standards. These are negotiations between health experts and what is financially feasible for communities to implement in terms of addressing. And so even things like chlorine and chloramine that are added to disinfect the water, that's good. We need disinfection, but we don't want the residuals and we don't want the byproducts that they produce. So filtering is super key. I would say especially for people, especially women that are either in preconception, pregnancy, breastfeeding, etc., is make sure or find out if there's fluoride in your water, because fluoride will suppress thyroid function. So low thyroid has associations with increased risk of autism. So it's just so super important. Should have been number 2.
I was going to say, for everyone, when we say water filtration, excuse me, you automatically think of drinking water, but it's not just drinking water. It's the water that you shower in or take a bath in, right? So it's beyond just the drinking water. And if you can't get, I think, we don't have to go into all the technical details of it, but if you can't get a whole house filter system, and there's a wide variety of them,
Yeah.
Then at the very least, you can get a filter at your shower head.
Yes.
You can get something to filter the bath water. You can get something at your sink for the drinking water. Like,
yes.
You would get different components of different things.
Yes. And they're varying in their efficacy, but anything is better than nothing. Pretty much all shower filters are the same, and they really only filter the bare minimum. But they do a decent job of taking chlorine out of the water. 50% of our chlorine intake comes from the shower.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal to get rid of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, in our current house, we don't have a whole house filter, but so I put one in the shower.
Yeah.
And, I don't always remember when to change it, and I just changed it out. And, my shower feels different to me.
Yes.
I can smell it. I feel it differently just when I change the filter. So just that little piece alone makes a difference. Yeah.
So all of this stuff together, and that's the aim, is like, let's do a little bit of this stuff, here and there all the time, and it makes it better. So yeah, filter your water for sure. I actually have a course that I teach on water contamination and filtration. It's super nerdy. So if people really want to be nerdy, they can check that out. But I am putting up some recommendations. But, people always ask, what kind of water filter should I buy? And I just want to let people know there is no such thing as a perfect filter for everyone. Our water is like a thumbprint, right? It's really unique to our geography, the age of our water system, where we live, whether or not there's lead in the fixtures in your house. Right. All of this stuff, there's so many variables. So you really have to match the filter to what's actually happening in your water system. So it's a complicated topic, but it's so important to address. So I'm glad that, yeah. All right. So where was I? 7? Am I on 7 or 8 now?
Now we're on 8.
Okay. Now we're at 8. So, dust your house regularly. This is a super low cost. It's free. Not at all sexy thing to tell people to do, but it's super important. So all of the stuff that we bring into our house, whether it's the air fresheners or the personal care products that we use, all of the things that our carpeting, our furniture, they're all releasing chemicals, right? That's just, things age. And as they age, they break down. And some materials sort of decompose way faster than others. And a lot of the chemicals that are added to the materials in our home, like our carpeting and our sofas and our curtains and all this stuff, they just kind of fall out all the time. They're just constantly shedding, and they end up in our house dust. So there's actually been a number of studies that looked at what are the chemicals that are ending up in house dust, and it's everything. It's BPA, it's phthalates, it's flame retardants, it's heavy metals, it's pesticides, it's all of that stuff. And same thing as I was saying earlier, that children and pets seem to have much higher levels of these things in them, even than adults living in the same house, because they're crawling around in the dust, and babies are putting fingers in their mouths and putting their mouths on everything, and pets are grooming themselves. So they have much higher levels of this stuff. So we want to and we can't stop our furniture from producing dust. Dust is just a thing that happens. We just have to be on top of it as much as we can. And we do that by wet dusting. So no feather dusters that just move stuff around. That doesn't do anything. We really want to trap it. And so I don't really like pointing people towards single-use disposable anything, because it's just garbage for the environment. Nothing ever goes away. And so I don't like pointing people towards things like a Swiffer.
Wet Swiffer, yeah.
But even a dry Swiffer, right? A dry Swiffer at least is trapping, because it's got that sort of like little Swiffery technology. Yeah. But you can easily use a microfiber cloth or any kind of damp rag, and it will do the trick. And then you launder that rag.
Right. Now,
technically all those things are just going back into your water, which is why you want to filter your water if you're laundering it. But it's all connected, folks. It is all connected. So yeah. And then, if your vacuum cleaner has a HEPA filter, excellent. That's ideal. If it doesn't, just make sure that you dust before you vacuum and you dust after you vacuum, because what that vacuum is doing is it's just kind of spitting out all that particulate matter back out over everything. So it's a little annoying, but kind of once you get into the hang of it, I think It's not that big of a deal.
How many vacuums have HEPA filters?
Not that many. And they're more expensive, but it's a good idea to get one if you can. You know, it's like put it on the registry, put it on the baby registry. We want a HEPA vacuum for our house, right? Like whatever you can do to get one, get one.
Got my interest peaked. HEPA filter vacuum. Okay.
Yes, yeah, it's just a good thing to have. I'm going to see if I can track down a couple and maybe I'll put them on my resource page. I'm just constantly thinking of things that come up in conversation that would be a great thing to kind of find and just have available to point people to. But yeah, HEPA filter is a really good idea. I'll kind of extend that out. This is not necessarily in the top 10, but it's just sort of an extension of this, is if you can afford getting an air purification system, it's not a bad idea to get one.
Okay.
It's just not a bad idea.
Air purification in every room?
It depends on the device and it depends on the size of your house. Okay. So some machines can clear, 1,000 square feet, 600 square feet in an hour. So, depends on, you put it in a hallway, it might be able to get kind of 2 rooms at once, or if you have a bigger room, but if you can't afford to get one in every room, which most people can't, and they're also, it's not that cheap and they're kind of ugly. I'm not gonna lie, they're a little bit ugly. Just stick it in the corner. You can move them around. They're usually really portable. The other thing is if people have HVAC systems, there are companies that make really wonderful filters that, I just found out about this at this conference.
They're not HEPA filters, are they?
It's beyond a HEPA filter.
And is it just the filter that goes into the
yes.
the vent, or do you have a separate attachment?
No, it just fits into your filter. They're called EnviroCleanse with a K. They make great products, including air purification systems and also some non-toxic cleaning products and stuff like that. But they also, I just learned about this shortly, not too long ago. They also have a option for if you have a built-in HVAC system, then you could get this filter that would fit into the system.
And it filters the smaller particulates.
Smaller particulates, I think it's down to 0.3 microns, which is
I like that.
Is really good. So we like these things. I like finding out about this stuff. I get excited.
Well, that's really
what was that?
I said it's really handy.
Yes, it is handy. Let's see, what other things? This should probably go up towards the top of the list too, but limit the consumption of canned foods.
Yes.
Canned foods are another source of bisphenol A, which is the same chemical that's found in a lot of plastics. I'll also tag on to that, and maybe this will be number 10, and this is like a random one, but it's a big deal, is try not to handle cash register receipts.
It's new, and one of the grocery stores that I go to, well, twofold, they said, although I think now maybe Whole Foods does it, but they changed their receipt paper.
If it's thermal paper, it's got BPA.
Got it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So or some other replacement like BPS or BPF. So I'll just say to everybody who's listening, if you see whether it's, at Target or Walmart or anywhere where you're shopping, some type of plastic that says BPA free, I need you to know that that's not real. Right? And
well, oh yeah, for sure.
Because so what companies have done is they've replaced bisphenol A with a nearly identical chemical in the same family called bisphenol S or bisphenol F. Has the same characteristics, same endocrine disruption, but technically they can say it's free of BPA.
Awesome.
So I always say BPA free is BS. And the same thing actually applies to cash register receipts. So cash register receipts there's like 3 layers. It's the paper, it's something else, and then there's a big old thick top layer of this developer, and the developer is BPA or bisphenols. And that powdery feeling that we feel when we touch cash register receipts is bisphenol A, and we actually absorb it through our skin. And if we're eating food after we handle the cash register receipts, we put it in our mouths. And what I encourage people to do is just take one of those little, either it's a regular size Ziploc bag or like the little snack bag size and stick it in your wallet. Maybe not so much in a man wallet, but like a lady wallet. Maybe this would work better. And put the receipts in there, because what happens is those receipts rub up against our cash. Every time you stick your hand in your wallet, you're contaminating your hands.
I've tried recently to make a habit of like just saying, no, I don't want the receipt.
Yeah.
Just email it or text it to me.
Yes. And I do that as much as possible. But if you have a business and you need to track receipts or for taxes and stuff like that, it's hard to get away from. But that's just a small thing. Just ask them to put it in the bag. Try to handle them as least amount as possible. And if somebody happens to work in a retail environment, like at a cash register, wear gloves.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so that's not anything to do with the home, but it's an occupational exposure. And I'll just throw in another one for good measure is open the windows in your house often and every day. Get the stuff out. Fresh air in, toxins out.
I like it. Well, I know if you're listening for the first time and being exposed to kind of the plethora of things that you can do and the plethora of things that we're exposed to environmentally, I am sure that this is overwhelming. So to reiterate what we said when we started, which was one thing at a time.
Yep.
Baby steps. Don't go crazy. And after watching this, start just like throwing things out. I mean, you can if you feel the need, but really the more realistic and practical way to do it is just to start fresh. One thing ends, you start new, and you just start building on it. And the things that you need to really just kind of clean house, you do. And you just make a point to say, okay, once a week, I'm going to do something different to change the pattern. And, don't overwhelm yourself with it, but these will make drastic, impactful health benefits for you.
Yeah. And I would even stretch it out and say, if you say I'm going to do one thing a month and I'm going to do it for a month until that sort of becomes habit, and then I'm going to move on. I've been teaching about this for 6.5 years. I've been learning about it for close to 9 or 10 years. I only just got a new bed. So this whole time I was sleeping on like a, mattress that probably had flame retardants and all kinds of junky chemicals in it, but it's an expensive item to swap out. So, my whole motto, and maybe this is a good place to sort of tie this up, but my whole motto is like, let's change the things that we can control so we worry less about the ones that we can't. Right? Let's cut ourselves some slack, because we can't be crazy people in the world. This has to be, it has to feel doable, and it's one step at a time. We don't change everything at once. If it takes you a couple of weeks to find a water filter, or it takes you a couple of weeks to find a better shampoo, great. It's still better than where you were last year, right? Any change is a great change. So,
and if you take these 10 areas and you do those once a month, in a year, you'll be a different person.
Oh my God, it's a huge difference. And the nice thing about these changes, and I'll just kind of throw this in, is that, I work with a lot of people that are also trying to make a lot of dietary changes. And those are actually harder, because there's a lot of like emotional attachment and sort of, but this is what we're not as attached to our laundry detergents as we think. Like, okay, cool, I'll change it. I'm not like, there's no emotional, should I eat the chocolate cake or should I not? Like there is when you're throwing out your plastic Tupperware. So once it's done, and you don't have to think about it anymore. And that's the beauty of it.
I love it. So if you haven't already gathered that she's the environmental toxin queen, by the end of this video, you now have. And as we were talking about before I pressed record, she has a wonderful new and beautiful new website with wonderful resources, which we will put links in our blog post and on this YouTube video for all of you, so that you guys can reach out and check out all the awesome information there. And I think we're also going to be sharing a 7-step preconception action sheet.
Yes.
As part of this as well. So hopefully everyone has found this for sure informative, because if they haven't, then they watched the wrong video. And really big thank you to you for taking the time out today educate everyone. I really, really appreciate it.
You are very welcome. This has been a lot of fun, and let everybody know that they can always, reach me through my website if they have questions. I'm happy to connect with people. So
yeah, we'll put all the links, I promise,
awesome.
here for all of that. And I'm looking at her beautiful face, big screen on my other. That's a great website, but it's really got a lot of really good resources, and she's working out the kinks in it. So bear with her if something happens and you don't get a response. But
yes.
So thanks again, everybody. If you thanks for watching. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. If you want to know when my next videos are coming out, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel to get notified. And if you want to get all my wonderful tips straight into your email box every week, then subscribe to my newsletter, marksklar.com/newsletter. All right, everyone. I'll see you in the next episode.
Are you looking for a fertility coach? Are you looking for someone to guide you with your personal needs one-on-one? Well, that can be me. If you want more information on that, check it out right here.